Hi, everyone. Welcome to Two Bald Guys Talking Safety. I'm Langdon DeMint,
And I'm Julian Taylor.
and welcome to our podcast.
Welcome to Two Bald Guys Talking Safety. My name's Julian Taylor, and I'm excited, as always, to be joined by my bald compadre.
Langdon DeMint. It's good to see you, buddy.
You did that in a very, very cool way, I've got to say.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, we are recording on the day after Halloween. As any regular listeners will know, I'm a grumpy English guy who doesn't get that excited by Halloween. Langdon is an excitable American guy who does get excited by Halloween. So I've got to ask, how did the evening go? What did you get up to?
You know, it was actually really chilly here. Like we're in I think it was in Tennessee, it was like in the 40s last night.
Okay, you're gonna have to translate that for the English part of our audience.
I'm better at going the other way than doing that math. Probably, what is 10 degrees over there? What's 10?
That's cool.
Probably around 10 to 11. Yeah. 10, 100, divided by 5, 50, maybe a hair lower.
That's probably hoodie and the jacket
Yeah.
weather.
And it was like in gloves. I mean, it was proper chilly, but we've already done, so we do these things called trunk or treats, like at churches, school, whatever. So we'd already done 3 of those. So I'm Halloween out.
And the kids were going, Dad, we've had enough. We want to go home. And you're going, no, we're going to do more.
No, Daddy wanted to go home. Everybody else was like, come on, just a couple more. And then finally, even Addie, can we go home? She was shivering. We rode the golf cart. Man,
yeah, you like your golf cart, don't you?
Yeah. And then a buddy of mine who lives not too far, his daughter wanted to ride. So we'll take it for a spin. He gets back and he's like, I got to get one. So see, that's, but it was good. We did quite a bit of trick-or-treating. And now, thank goodness, it's over. I didn't dress up last night. I was done dressing up. I did it for the trunk or treats. So I was done.
What was your costume? Then?
It was Prince Eric from The Little Mermaid. Although it looked more like, probably, I was told by numerous people, Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. Probably because my muscles and things like that. But I do agree.
You hide those very well. I'll have to take a closer look next time.
But wait, I need to ask you, did you have any people in your cave?
The great thing is about the cave, people are going to think I live in a cave now. The great thing about living in the cave, or where we live in the cave, is, you have to come down the little drive and then round to the left. Nobody knows the house is here. So we don't get people knocking on the door. It's great. Caroline bought a bunch of sweets. No kids. I had to eat the sweets.
So the two of you were just trick-or-treating.
So we just trick-or-treated ourselves. Yeah.
Nice. Very good.
So I've got to ask the question, Langdon. What happens to the golf cart the rest of the year?
No, it's driven heavily.
Yeah?
Yeah. I need to get a, the winter, I'm sure you've seen it, the winter, like bags you put over the side for weather and stuff. I need to get one of those actually, but we still drive it. When it's super, when it January-ish, February, it might not get a lot of riding, but we drive it.
Where'd you go in it?
What do you mean? Where do I not go? Go to the grocery store, go get my ice cream. I've done many drive-throughs with the golf cart.
I've just got this picture in my head now of you going through the drive-through.
Pretty spot on, actually. Yeah, so wherever. If I don't feel like taking the truck out, take the golf cart.
I think I've got something missing in my life.
You really do.
Do you think we need to talk about safety?
What do you got?
What have I got? Well, I'll tell you what I've not got. I've not got a top tips for 2024, which is what happens every year, isn't it? Every single year, somebody comes out with the top tips. In fact, most people do. Magazines, podcasts, they all do top tips. But we thought we could just talk a little bit, couldn't we, about some of the things we could think about for next year, without calling it top tips.
And also we should probably specify it's because if we shift this it's liable to really take off, this phraseology, if you will, being the influencers that we are. So I just wanted to preface that with this transition that we've come up with.
So what we've got to do is we're not going to mention the word trend, and we're not going to mention the word tip as we go through this particular episode. But we could think about some of the things we want to carry on doing, couldn't we?
Or do differently.
Yeah. And you're talking about being an influencer, and it makes me chuckle because and I've got to see whether you get the same experience that I get. So, when you meet somebody maybe for the first time and they go, and what do you do? And you say, I've got a podcast.
I don't say that, see. So there's our
Don't you?
first.
Okay. So maybe they say, what do you do at work? And I might say, well, I do a few things, but including I've got a podcast. And you can see they get all excited when you say you're part of a podcast. And then they say, the next question that inevitably comes is, what's your podcast about? And you say, health and safety. And instantly the look of excitement changes, doesn't it? And it's almost the rolling of the eyes. And I remember I was on a train journey. I was going down south. I was on a train journey, and this train was absolutely rammed because a load of trains had been cancelled. So we ended up with this really bizarre situation where it was a table for 4, and there were 3 people sitting on the other side, including husband and wife. And then there's me and this lady sitting on my side of the table. And it's that inevitable conversation. You start talking to people, and there's that inevitable conversation around what do you do? And it was so distinct with the people on that train, because I'd sort of mentioned podcasts and then health and safety. And immediately they just turned to the lady next to me and went, and what do you do? And it was almost like, yes, that's incredibly boring, so we're not going to talk to you. So I think one of the things we were thinking about was starting to think about how do we carry on trying to change that perception, and what's the effect of that perception on this profession that we're involved with.
You should probably, just for future, don't start off with I do a podcast and then, it's health and safety. Say, if I throw it out, it's usually later. Like, I'm a health and safety professional. What do you do? And then I get in, and then if the conversation goes somewhere, then I'm like, hey, we have a podcast as well. What are you talking about? I mean, and I go with, well, the first few minutes are pretty light, just, what's happening in the world, what's something we did, funny. I was like, it's pretty jovial. And then we talk about something health and safety related and applied. So I make it not sound like we're discussing health and safety, Bueller.
So it's my fault. It's my fault.
We got to change our approach to discussing the podcast.
Okay, cool. I will try that, and I will update our listeners on future pods in terms of how that's going. Yeah, I have been asked for one selfie so far, though, which is, I think, is one more than you.
Yeah, it's probably true, actually. I'll agree with that in regards to the podcast. Yeah.
I don't know whether I've said it on the pod before, but I do love it when I tell my grown-up kids that I'm an influencer, and they just look at me and roll their eyes and say, "Yeah, Dad, whatever."
Start small.
But I think it is important, isn't it? Because, I mean, I've done it as a bit of an exercise before at a speaking engagement where I've got everybody to just write down what they wanted to do when they were a kid or a teenager. What sort of jobs did they have in mind, and how many do you think put health and safety professional down as something that they wanted to do?
Probably very few.
Very few.
Very, very few.
Yeah. And then the next part of that, and it's interesting, and be interesting for any comments that we get on the back of this, is how did you get into health and safety? And most people fall into it by mistake or by accident. Yeah. I mean, I think about people like Simon Jones, who we had on the podcast, old Big Mouth, as he prefers to be called sometimes. But you talk to Simon, and he fell into it by mistake. Yeah, and he's such a big advocate now, but he fell into it by mistake, having left the police force.
Well, and I think, I do think there's a lot of people now, especially in the States, that depending on where they go to school, there's a lot of schools that have excellent health and safety programs, the environmental management, industrial hygiene. I mean, which, and we talked about it. That's kind of how I got into it. Was a friend of mine on the board and at a grad program in occupational health and safety, industrial hygiene, and I was kind of in that lag period of going for the optometry school, and then I went to visit. And I was like, I kind of like this. I don't know, things just seemed like they were lining up. I was like, maybe this is where the good Lord's telling me I need to give her a whirl, because it was since I was a little kid, my dream, Jules, was be an eye doctor so I could play a lot of golf. I'm just going to be honest. That was that was the plan. So instead, I became a health safety professional and don't get to play as much golf. So here we are. But I do think it's something that more prevalence is coming about, especially in the States, just because it's good. You find a job. I mean, at Murray State, they had an excellent, that's where I got my master's. I want to say if you were willing to move, which, for the job, it was like 100% you were going to get a job when you were done. And it's a profession that it's needed. More people are needed, and it's only going to increase, whether it be from regulations or best practice, whatever you want to tie it to. I think it's going to, but it's that aspect of how can we make it not the safety cop, right? How can we make it more welcoming? Because then there's a whole burnout that's, I mean, we'll talk about with our focus, but I think it's a great point. Trying to drive the dream of of health and safety.
Well, I think that the so just thinking about that, it's actually what a lot of our guests have talked about, isn't it? I mean, they talk about how do we start to just change that perception so people want to get involved and want to. So how do we get that different sort of generation in? And a lot of it is around the behaviours of people who are safety professionals, isn't it? So if you're seen as that high vis clipboard wielding sort of fun policeman, actually what you are going to do is you're going to just keep reinforcing that image. And a lot of the stuff we talk about, where we talk about not making it about forms and process, but actually getting to know people and building relationships with people so that you can just have good conversations with them about the way they do things, is is sort of some of these sort of simple things that we can start to do that change that perception. I am just thinking in my head as well, what you're just talking about there. If you wanted to play lots of golf rather than training to be an eye doctor, why didn't you just train to be a better golfer and play lots of golf?
Well, I was doing that too. See, that's the thing. But reality, when I was in college, reality of like, I was good, but if I was going to go next level, I needed to pretty much devote a lot more time than. So I think the lazy, realistic view came to, if you want to know the truth about it. In retrospect, I probably would have done things different. But you know what? Here we are. Let's just move, look forward. And Lindsay won't give me 2 years of solid practice, is all I'm asking right now.
And he's good, but he ain't no tiger.
Hey, well, I might be now. No, I'm kidding. Just kidding. That's true. Valid point.
So I think one of the things for next year is starting to think about, right, in my business, how do we in my organization, how do we start to change that perception around what is safety and why is it important? And I think another key part of that, we've talked about this before, is actually that personal value around safety. So why, for an individual in an organization, maybe working on the shop floor somewhere, just doing a job, actually what's in it for them? What's the value for them to do safety? And we've talked in previous pods about actually exercises you can do where you get them to think about what's important in their life and what could be the effect if they get it wrong around safety that stops them doing those things that they love. Yeah. So actually safety is not about business values, it's about personal values. Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because, we what we didn't want to call this, and it's more where we want to put the focus.
Don't say those words. No T words.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not saying that. It's where we need to put the focus going forward and maybe do things the same. A lot of people get so caught up in and looking at it from the trend words or whatever you want to see. A lot of people get really caught up in that, and it's easy to do because that's the what we call quote unquote flavor of the month or flavor of the year or whatever. That's kind of their main goal. But when you do that, a lot of times I feel like you get so caught up in that you miss other areas of potential growth, right? And that's why what we're discussing and how we want to improve. It's looking at where should we focus. Maybe it's where we're already focusing. After the c word that or the word that must not be named, people they however you want to say it, their focus maybe became on C word and just managing, making sure then people got vaccinated, making sure they could contact trace, make sure, which I'm not negating it, but we talked about it. A lot of organizations got so focused on that, they quit focusing on the basic health and safety, the regulatory, other, well, I mean, that's a regulatory infection, but you know what I mean, the other regulatory. So we got so caught up on that. And I mean, if you want to call it a trend, whatever, but they started missing the other aspects. And then now we've come out of that. And really, where are we? We are where I didn't think we would be, but we're back. The new normal is pretty much the old normal. And I didn't think I think you and I were talking about this a little bit, but I really didn't think that would happen. I thought the new normal would be slightly different, but it's
It's amazing though, isn't it? It's amazing that we can have,
it's pretty much the same.
yeah, absolutely world-changing events, can't we? And then when we get through it, we just all sort of reset back to doing what we used to do before. Yeah.
Which is a powerful thing because that shows behavior, that shows, how people are. We find our comfort zone. A lot of things changed, but for a lot of company, the new normal still was reverting back to the OG, if you will. So I think that's as we kind of continue this conversation, I think that's something worthwhile. What we're wanting to discuss is very much where do we truly need to focus that can help expand on what we're already doing.
I think kind of building on that point is trying to get people to do things differently. What we have to do is we have to we have to be repetitive. It's really interesting because my role, a big part of my sort of day to day role, when I'm not being an influencer on a podcast, and I am smiling at myself there. It is actually around coaching. It's around coaching members of our team, and the biggest thing that I see all the time is we have to just be repetitive and keep telling people stuff because people don't get things the first time. They don't sometimes get it 6, 7, 8 times. You've got to keep going until it just becomes habit. And I suppose the coaching piece is the bit I love most about my job, obviously, apart from getting to talk to you every couple of weeks. Um, but
Pretty
but
regular, don't lie.
but I love. I'm not. Yeah. I love that time. But I love the coaching side. I love that spending time with people and sort of helping them to sort of look at how they do things and how they could change the way they do things. And again, I think that should be a big focus for safety professionals. Is how do I just free up more of my time to just go and spend time talking with people, and getting to really understand them, getting to really understand what they do, how they do it, and being able to help them to think about how they might do it differently. And another big part of that one, and we've talked about this a lot, Langdon, is the knock-on effect, the ripple effect of actually doing that in terms of just creating a better overall culture in a business, not safety culture, actually by showing that interest in people and spending that time talking with people, it starts to just create that overall better business culture that has a knock-on effect in terms of quality, in terms of production, all sorts of things. because people are more engaged with the organisation that they work for. And I think safety can make their role bigger and evidence that if they can start to free themselves up from paperwork and process and forms, and actually get more time to spend just with people.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think that, to me, so if we're saying the focus, there's our 1 and 2, I guess, or maybe compound 1, whatever. Thinking about not making it a tick box exercise, but being more influential when it comes to health and safety, which to me really ties to the next one that we discussed, and that's the mental health aspect. And it's because, and I think we saw this before the C word, more, that mental health, the total worker health, the wellness, the well-being, all that was really coming into play more so. And it seemed like it was probably trending more with the younger generation, but some older, and trying to figure out how can we meet in the middle. And honestly, if anything, I think C word kind of helped bridge that. I do think that, which was a byproduct that was more positive. But now I think more than ever, there is a cognizance of that. And it seems like people are more getting on board with how can we manage the worker better. And I don't want to dive too deep into this just because I'm subtitle. We will have a follow-up in a few weeks to
We've
a
got something exciting coming on this
coming with
topic,
this.
haven't
So
we?
we don't want to go.
Yeah.
We don't want to dive too far, but
No.
I think it's worth noting. It's becoming a problem, and it's not in a negative way. But I guess some organizations, but I mean, it's something we have to figure out as health and safety professionals. How can we better manage workers? Because we know if there's if you're, think about it, if when you came to work tired, for example, stressed out, your kid was up all night or whatever, there's a runoff that it's pretty difficult to be focused when you're just kind of tired, and especially if I'm in a strenuous or a high hazard job, that's dangerous. So for the safety professional, then I have to not just make sure that I've empowered and that they're ready to do their job safely, so they're ready to start safe. But then when you throw that mix, a lot of times I don't know I don't know, Jules. I don't know how your night was. Did you and Caroline get into a fight? Did something happen? You don't know that when you show up at work.
We never fight.
I know,
We
but
don't fight.
let's hypothetical scenario. I don't know that, and I'm assuming you're coming to work ready to go and just, and that's, I think, the challenge that we have to what we have to figure out is how can the health and safety professional be aware, or maybe it's extra cognizant. I don't know what the right phrase would be, but for everybody that's doing their job. And then how do they better work with HR? So, there's certain things that HR can't tell health safety, or, how that, we'll go down that road, but they have to then figure out how to work better for the people. And that's a challenge. And I think a lot of organizations are at that point of, and if they're not, honestly, they should be thinking about that, because one of the best ways to ensure that everyone's healthy, safe, ready to do the job is that they're prepared to physically and emotionally do the job.
I still think, it's an interesting one, isn't it? When COVID hit, I think there became this uber focus on mental health and check-ins, and because people were all of a sudden weren't coming into a work environment, they were working from home, and I think that I think we have gone backwards again. I think again it's that settling back down into what's the norm. I think people talk about mental health, but again, I think we can still do more. Again, we've got an episode coming up where we're going to talk about this specifically. But again, that whole coaching piece, I'm just thinking aloud here, it's almost that coaching piece, just talking to people a lot, building relationships, puts you in a far better position to understand actually where somebody is mentally. Because I think it's that classic thing of, if you're my manager and we just have managerial type interactions, actually, I'm never going to feel that comfortable to say I'm struggling.
That's why you have to drive camaraderie.
Well, you need camaraderie, and camaraderie actually. I was talking about this with somebody the other day. I was talking about what's the difference between a manager and a coach. Um, and one of the big things you could really distill it down to is actually a manager tells and a coach asks. So a coach is questioning, but actually a coaching relationship is very different to a manager relationship, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think
Shouldn't
again,
be, but
it should
many, yeah,
it shouldn't, but it often is,
yeah.
isn't it? And so I think if we can sort of have that slightly different approach in terms of, right, how do we interact with people and actually spend when we go and talk to them, actually make sure it's sincere, and we want to spend that quality time with them to properly understand what's going on in their world. Because I think we've talked about this before, is there is an absolute correlation, isn't there, between the mental state of an individual and the likelihood of something happening in terms of safety. The health and safety are just intrinsically linked, aren't they? So if I come to work and I'm tired and I'm not in a good frame of mind, my focus isn't where it needs to be in terms of, right, how am I going to do this job today? Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think that's where we're kind of shifting to maybe the next focus in addition to
Yeah.
SIF, but the importance of HOP, human organizational performance. And that's a struggle because, we talk about our maturity model. So maybe I'm beelining slightly, but not everyone is going to feel like they are prepared to talk about human and organizational performance and actually looking at the uh, if you want to call it the behavioral aspect of workers, which alludes and ties right into many times the mental health. So a lot of people aren't prepared. A lot of organizations aren't prepared to do that. And if they're more on the reactive side, they're trying to work their way to compliance. I will say that it's still pretty advantageous for them to start thinking about that. Yes, I know that's typically a very, very much a proactive approach, but just think about the way you're doing things, the way you're managing things. And I think you start seeing that if we understand that all our employees, just to what you said a minute ago, all employees, it's, health and safety, it's on the ground. We get caught up in thinking, well, I'm the safety professional, which means organizations looking at me at being safety. I mean, I am, but my job is to really empower, make sure we have the programs, the processes, yada, yada in place and empower people. But I can't. Yeah, your printer's going. It's been pretty crazy watching things just slowly come beside you. Um,
I've got to say, we're showing this is a genuine, real podcast here, is that Caroline has decided to print a 72-page document right in the middle of when I'm recording a podcast.
I knew it wasn't you, but I've seen a lot of stuff come out, and I was like, man, somebody. And I assumed it was Caroline somewhere just printing it up. Jules, could you get the paper for me? but
I'm gonna have to just turn the printer off next time we record, aren't we? So,
I couldn't hear it. I just saw it, so you're good. But I do think there's something to that because if organizations start really thinking about how they can be more ingrained in their employees and how can we maximize, how can I ensure that you know Jenny is ready to do the job. We're putting a lot to her and the process, and we're empowering her and giving her that truly start safe mindset. Even if you don't have a lot of the things built in yet, you're still trying to create that robustness or whatever you want to call it, health and safety. You start seeing, I think you'll start seeing quicker change, right? And getting to where you want to be on a maturity standpoint, because it's going to be a challenge. I see that being a big focus is thinking about how we can better interact with our workers. So if you want to do it from that human and organizational performance mindset, we've done quite a bit of two or three podcasts on that. But I think in addition to that, then you start looking at it from a kind of the SIF potential and kind of go into that also. So I think there's a couple of avenues to think about for that.
there's a point you just made there as well about actually the safety person is not all about them. And I think again, you think immediately about that that maturity curve, actually a great thing to reflect on as a safety professional is actually who do people look to and who do people see as the drivers of safety in this organization? And if it's you and it's maybe just you and a small team of safety people that you've got, that's a challenge for you, because you're really going to struggle to move up that curve towards proactive and excellence. So something to be thinking about is, right, how do we start to spread the love here? How do we start to get it so that actually more parts of the organization are more independent when it comes to doing safety?
Find your champions at all levels.
And that's a great thing for 2024, is to actually say, right, who are the people out there who've got an enthusiasm, who've got a hunger, that actually we could make them a champion, yeah, and actually they could start to be that sort of ambassador for safety out there in the broader world, and I think start to identify also the jobs that you can start to distribute and delegate. So rather than the safety team doing the JHAs, for example, or doing any kind of risk management, actually start to delegate that out so people do it. The people who are doing the jobs do the sort of risk assessments, do the JHAs, and that way, hey, you start to empower more people, and people actually like being given jobs, don't they? It's the crazy thing. You give them jobs, it shows you've got a trust in them. It empowers people. But it also builds their knowledge. It makes them more aware. It makes them talk about it, and it starts to make it so safety is not the thing that is done by the safety professional. It's done by the organisation, and the safety professional is literally is the coach. They go and they're checking in, and they're talking, and they're just checking in on things. So I think that's something you can actively do straight away, is just have that self-reflection to say, where are we in terms of that journey?
Which creates, I mean, really, we hit on we had a listeners, we had a mild order of things. I mean, it's the Wild West sometimes, but it wasn't an order. But this becomes the last one, really, because it's that driving, and then we'll do SIF in a moment. But it makes that thinking about it, how can we make it positive, right? I mean, that's what it is. When you establish better HOP mindset, that human organization performance, when you really start establishing that in an organization, and establishing more cadence, establishing better camaraderie, I think you start seeing the mental side coming into it. When an organization has a lot of programs, processes that are, maybe they're cumbersome, you start trying to think, how can we really make it positive? And I think everything that we've said has been, you hit it on earlier. Don't be the one in the high vis vest and the clipboard, your glasses, you lower them a little bit. I saw that, don't be that. But it's more than just thinking negatively always about health and safety. It's about driving, being visible in a positive light. And I love finding champions. We, whether doing like true consulting, or whether thinking about it from a software transition, in relation to that, you always have to find champions. And those are the ones that at all levels, maybe it's a VP that, that can push it. Maybe it's a frontline worker, a mid-level. When you find champions at all levels, you start seeing that more positivity can come, and you're empowering the others, because they're saying, well, crap, it's not just Jimmy and Jenny, it's Mr. Johnson, it's all of them. And I think that's when you start really seeing that you can create that positive culture where things become more known, right?
Yeah, I talk about creating noise. You've got to almost start to create safety noise, and that's not things crashing into each other, but it's people talking about it, isn't it? It's people talking about safety, and making it just more of that day-to-day conversation. So, I mean, we talked before about we get into sort of ruts with stuff, don't we? And we settle back into some after COVID. So one of the classic ruts is that reporting thing of, we'll report once a month to senior leadership. So it means senior leadership thinking about safety once a month and talk about it once a month.
And even if they think about it more, if you don't do it, that reflects pretty.
That's it. So actually, how do we make it so, say in a manufacturing situation, if you have a daily briefing, give people good information so they can talk about safety every day. Yeah, they can talk about, but they can talk about positive things. They're not just talking about incidents. They might talk about inspections that have been done, checks that have been done, hazards that have been resolved. They start to talk about good stuff and positive stuff, and they do it more frequently. Um, so I think there's some simple things you can do very quickly that start to change that mindset and that perception. And I think the why question as well is a really important one. I've just been thinking as we were talking and reflecting on an experience, which was I used to work for a big business and we had a big distribution center. And I can remember a couple of times walking in and you had to wear a high vis waistcoat in this distribution center. So even in broad daylight, walking through the work area, you've got to wear high vis. And quite often, I had an office upstairs. I come downstairs, forget my high vis, and walk in, and there was a particular guy who was a bit of a safety lead, and he would just shout at me, "Put your high vis on,
Jones, go upstairs.
put your high vis on," and it's that classic. This is pre me sort of really getting involved with safety. It's that classic kind of. Well, he's just a pain in the backside, isn't he? He's just all I want to do is walk from here to there. It's broad daylight. Anybody can see me. Why do I need to put a high vis jacket on? Particularly with sort of the stripes on, the reflective stripes that aren't going to work in broad daylight anyway. Um, so, but nobody ever he never came across to me and said, Jules, this is why I'd like you to wear a high vis jacket or a high vis waistcoat. And quite often, if we explain the why to people, they go, "Yeah, sure," and they do it. But rather than shout or tick boxes, let's explain the why. That's quite a simple thing to do. Yeah.
Yep, I agree. And I think our final one, which we don't have to dive, we've hit a lot on it, is really just tying in the focus on SIF. It is becoming more predominant. So serious injury fatalities. Incident rates kept going down, but SIFs, and I think, well, actually putting this in probably made the most sense. It's pretty inherent that the more focus we put on people, when we start looking at the behaviors, thinking about preventative, in most cases, you're going to prevent the serious injury fatality. So, I mean, there's a lot to it. Yes, start figuring out how we actually make that criteria for what is even a potential of a serious incident. So it's even going back and thinking, should we reassess some posts? But also, even if you're not at that point, just start thinking, where can we look now to prevent those serious injuries, fatalities that are prevalent in the workplace? And there's, the more, hopefully what we're seeing is the more champions we get, the more we've really embodied that, I think, health and safety mindset, safe operations, whatever you want to call it, we will start seeing still more serious injuries going down, right? Now there's fluke things that can always happen, but I think the more cognizant and prepared that we can be, so we understand if a failure occurs, we've mitigated it to acceptable levels, we've done whatever, we've built in that capacity to manage controls. I think we'll start seeing a better focus for organizations, because I think that's only going up, right? And it's how can we think differently?
And if anyone wants to listen back to hear some more about this, we did a great pod, didn't we? And not because of me or you, but it was your buddy who came on, wasn't it?
No, it was Todd, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, you could just sit and listen to Todd for hours, couldn't you? But he's got so much to say about that whole area. So if anybody wants to hear more about that, go and dig that episode of the pod out and take a listen to it.
Yeah, good and very educational. I think that's something to kind of wrap up. I would encourage, hopefully everything you're seeing, it's very, yeah, we can do the same thing. We can talk about it, but we always talk about and what's that gotten? If we really think about it, we always talk about, well, chemical management, slip, trip, and falls. I mean, they're always going to happen. So it's how can we mitigate it? How can we prepare? And just really, I think the more we empower and really get vested in with people, maybe even those things will start cleaning up. a little better.
So that probably brings us to the end of our time, and hopefully it's not been dull and boring. And we've kept the mentions of high-vis apparel to a minimum. We've had the printer go off. We've talked about Langdon's golf cart. But again, what we'll keep doing is we'll keep just trying to keep raising that awareness and that sort of changing the image around health and safety. And we just keep talking about it. And again, we've still got some more good guests coming up in the near future. So wherever you get your podcasts, wherever you got this podcast from, please keep listening, and we will be talking to you again very soon. So Langdon, do you want to sign us out?
So with that, everyone, hope you all have a great day, great week, and stay healthy and safe, and watch each other's back out there. Thanks, everyone. Hey everyone, really appreciate you tuning into this episode of Two Bald Guys Talking Safety. Please follow and subscribe to wherever you stream your favorite podcast, or visit us at evotix.com.
And if you want to see how follically challenged we really are, come and check us out on YouTube. If you've got value from the podcast, please go to Apple Podcasts, and in the review section of this podcast, if you could leave us a review or a rating, that would be great.
And as always, everyone, while you're going about your days, about your normal lives, stay safe out there and watch each other's back.